December 1944. The winter wind over eastern France carried a sharp, metallic cold that morning, one that crept into every cockpit seam and stung the face of any airman unlucky enough to be flying beneath the cloud layer. The weather had grounded patrols across the region for nearly a week, and the Luftwaffe used that lull well, repositioning squadrons, repairing fighters, and preparing ambushes. Allied bomber crews knew it, fighter escorts knew it, and LT William Bill Overstreet Jr., call sign Butch, felt the tension the moment he stepped onto the runway at Raydon Airfield with the rest of the 357th Fighter Group at 21 years old. Bill looked younger than most of the men he flew with, but he carried himself with a calm, steady confidence that made others trust him instantly. He wasn't the loudest in the briefing room nor the boldest at the officers' club, but once strapped inside the cockpit of his P-51B Mustang, he came alive with a clarity few pilots ever achieved. His aircraft, nicknamed Bloody Butch, wasn't the newest Mustang model, but Overstreet understood her like a dance partner. The roar of her Merlin engine, the weight of her control stick, the vibration that ran through the fuselage at full throttle, these were sensations Bill had memorized. Woven into instinct, that morning's briefing was simple on paper. Escort bombers toward manufacturing centers, deep in German-occupied France. Keep the Luftwaffe away. Bring everyone home. But nothing in the war was simple anymore. The intelligence reports placed multiple Luftwaffe formations near Clermont-Ferrand, some flying Bf-109s, others FW-190s. The German fighter wings were growing bolder, launching intercepts earlier and more aggressively. Bill listened carefully as his squadron leader, Major Thomas Hayes, reviewed rendezvous points, break-off rules, emergency procedures. At the end, Hayes looked around the room and said, "Stay tight. If you get separated, climb. Don't let them drag you low." Bill nodded, but a nagging feeling sat heavy in his stomach. Something in the weather, the mission spacing, the enemy reports, it all felt wrong. But doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford. He pulled on his gloves, tightened his parachute straps, and climbed into the cockpit of Bloody Butch. Minutes later, the runway blurred under his wheels as the aircraft lifted into the winter sky. The journey south toward the bomber stream was calm at first. The 357th formed a layered escort structure above and around the heavy bombers. Visibility was limited. Patches of thick clouds created natural tunnels in the sky. Bill kept his eyes scanning constantly, searching for the thin glint of enemy fighters approaching from above. A streak of silver slashed through the haze, then another, and another. Suddenly the sky erupted, a German swarm diving at high speed, aiming directly for the bombers. Bill jammed his throttle forward, peeling away from his element to intercept. Radio chatter exploded through the headset. "Bandits at 10 o'clock. Stay tight. Stay tight. Break left." But as the formations merged, a wall of clouds swallowed their visibility. The bombers continued their straight-line course, but the escort fighters were scattered like leaves in a storm. Bill burst through the far side of the cloud. Alone for a moment. There was nothing, just the empty sky and the faint glimmer of sunlight on the snow fields below. Then they appeared. First 2 Messerschmitts, then 4, then nearly a dozen, a full Luftwaffe fighter group, angling toward him with predatory precision. Overstreet's heart pounded, but his hands remained steady on the controls. He had no wingman, no squad support, no layered defense, just a single P-51B, low fuel reserves, and an entire Luftwaffe squadron tightening its formation to cut him off. Overstreet immediately dove, trading altitude for speed. Tracers flashed past his canopy-thin orange-white streaks that glowed brighter in the cold air. He jinked left, rolled right, then snapped his Mustang downward in a high-speed dive. The earth rose to meet him, a blur of snow-covered fields and winding roads. Every instinct screamed the same command. Run, but run where? He was deep over occupied territory. If he fled in a straight line, the German fighters would be on him in seconds. If he dove too low, anti-aircraft guns would tear him apart. If he climbed, He'd become an easy target. He needed to do the one thing they didn't expect: fight. Overstreet pulled hard into a climbing left turn, trying to split the formation. The lead 109 overshot, surprised by the sudden aggression. Bill swung the nose of the Mustang up and fired a burst from his 6.50 caliber machine guns. The tracers flashed across the Messerschmitt's wing hits, but not enough. The German banked away. The others closed in. Still alone. Still hunted. But something inside. Bill shifted. Fear gave way to clarity. Numbers didn't matter. He would fight as long as the Mustang stayed airborne. He dove again, the airframe shuddering as he pushed into the red zone. The Germans followed, diving with him, matching every move. They herded him downward, trying to force him toward the forests east of Clermont-Ferrand, where flak guns waited up. Bill recognized the tactic immediately. The Luftwaffe didn't just want him defeated, they wanted him trapped. Forced low. Forced predictable. Forced into their kill box. Not today. He muttered. He leveled the Mustang just above tree height, the treetops blurring inches below his wings. Snow kicked into the air in his wake. The Germans followed, but spread out. All it would take was one mistake, one tree, one misjudgment of speed, and the chase would end violently. Bill jerked the Mustang into a hard right turn, skimming the ground and forcing the lead German to adjust. The airframe groaned under the G-load. Bill felt his vision narrow, black creeping at the edges. He gritted his teeth and held the turn, emerging inside the German spiral. He fired again. Another burst across the 109's fuselage. More hits, but more German fighters were closing. The sky behind him was filling with Black Dot's predators, closing in. Overstreet knew he needed a miracle or a maneuver so reckless the enemy wouldn't expect it. The kind of maneuver pilots didn't train for. The kind that turned men into legends or killed them instantly. And just ahead, the faint silhouette of Clermont-Ferrand began rising through the mist. He wasn't running into the city. He was going to use it. The entire shape of the battle was about to change. And Bill Overstreet, alone, outnumbered, and nearly out of sky, was about to attempt one of the most dangerous stunts ever flown in World War II. The city of Clermont-Ferrand emerged through a thin curtain of fog. Its cathedrals, chimneys, and stone bridges rising like dark teeth against the whiteness of winter. Overstreet had never seen it from this angle, this low, this fast, this desperate. His Mustang's engine roared at full power, the Merlin vibrating through the fuselage as he dove toward the rooftop stop behind him. The Luftwaffe squadron closed the noose. 10. 12, maybe more Messerschmitt Bf 109 streaked in from above, the sunlight glinting off their wings as they descended like metallic hawks. Their formation tightened, confident, predatory. To them, the lone American was prey. A Mustang cut off from its flight, separated from support, deep in enemy territory. A dead man flying. Overstreet gripped the control stick tighter. The Mustang responded instantly, her nose dipping inches above the slate roofs. The Germans followed the dive, unaware that Bill's decision wasn't reckless. It was deliberate. He wasn't fleeing into danger. He was setting a trap. The Luftwaffe wanted him low. Good. He would go low enough to force them into unfamiliar terrain, a city where cluttered rooftops, narrow corridors of air, and rising smokestacks punished sloppy flying. A place where one mistake meant death. Overstreet skimmed between two apartment blocks, so closely that laundry lines snapped from the wind blast. Civilians looked up in shock as two fighters thundered overhead, barely higher than the chimneys. The rest of the German squadron spread out, surrounding the outer ring of the city like wolves circling a wounded animal. German anti-aircraft batteries around Clermont-Ferrand instantly opened fire. Black puffs erupted in the sky, bursting in oily blossoms of smoke. The flak wasn't precise, it didn't need to be. Anything airborne was a target. And right now, Bill Overstreet was the only airborne target in the kill zone. Shell bursts shook the air around him. The Mustang jolted violently as a near miss peppered his left wing with shrapnel. Warning lights flickered. His instrument panel rattled. The engine groaned, pushing its limits, but he stayed locked on the lead 109 dot if he could bring down the squadron leader. The entire formation might break. The German pilot and experienced ace named, according to post-war records, Hans-Joachim Badelec led the chase with cold confidence. He had hunted dozens of Allied aircraft through French skies. He knew every ridge, every crossroads, every safe corridor, but even he didn't expect Overstreet's next move. The 109 pulled up sharply to reposition above a stone viaduct bridge that connected two parts of the city. Badelec's plan was simple: pop above the bridge, force the American into a predictable climb, and let the guns finish the job. Overstreet saw the trap instantly. Any pilot who wanted to live would have broken away. Pulled up, aborted the pursuit. Bill didn't. He rolled the Mustang onto her side, wings vertical, and dove beneath the bridge, her wingtips clearing the stone walls by feet. Air rushed through the arch with a howl so intense it echoed off the riverbanks. Civilians on the banks stared in frozen disbelief. No one Allied or Axis had ever seen a P-51 fly under a bridge in combat. On the far side, Overstreet leveled out with perfect timing. Badelec glanced back through his canopy and froze. The American was still there, still glued to his tail, still refusing to guide out, and now the German was the one in the trap. Overstreet thumbed the trigger. Burst of .50 caliber fire tore through the cold air and stitched across the 109's fuselage. Sparks erupted. Oil sprayed backward, streaking Overstreet's canopy. The Messerschmitt banked sharply, trying to escape, but the damage was done. Its engine coughed, sputtered, and began trailing black smoke. Badelec was going down. The 109 climbed desperately, looking for any altitude to bail out. But the damage was too severe. The aircraft stalled, rolled, and spiraled into a snowy field outside the city. Resistance fighters watching from afar would later confirm what Overstreet could not afford to. The German ace did not survive the crash, but Overstreet had no time to celebrate. The remaining Messerschmitts were still in the fight. The moment Bloody Butch cleared the edge of the city, every German pilot who still had altitude dove on him at once 6 aircraft converging from above, 2 sweeping in from the sides. Overstreet shoved the throttle forward, the Merlin powering through the sustained abuse like a battle-hardened warhorse. The sky lit up with tracers. Flak guns. Now, confused by the swirling chaos, began firing into the entire mass of fighters, American and German alike. Overstreet used that confusion, diving so low the treetops whipped past his wings. The Germans followed, but their formation broke apart. Some pulled away. Some disengaged entirely, unwilling to follow the American into another death trap. 2 stayed behind. 1 slashed across his nose. Overstreet rolled under it, snapping into a tight turn that forced the German to overshoot. The second dove behind him, spraying cannon fire that shredded the air where the Mustang had been moments earlier. Another burst hit Overstreet's rudder. The Mustang bucked violently. A panel ripped away. Smoke trailed from beneath the tail. Bill exhaled slowly. He wasn't scared anymore. He was focused. Come on, girl. Hold together. He jerked the Mustang right, forcing the Germans into a turning fight. The P-51B, lighter and quicker in a dive, slipped inside their arc. The Germans tried to regain advantage through altitude, but Bill stayed low, weaving through valleys, dipping over hedgerows, using the terrain like a shield. Then, for the first time since the fight began, Overstreet saw open sky, clear air. No flak, no buildings, no traps. He pulled the Mustang into a climbing turn, hoping the damaged engine could still deliver enough power to get him above the tree line. The remaining German fighters pursued, but they were losing cohesion without their leader. 1 leveled out and broke away. Another began lagging, nursing engine trouble from earlier hits. Overstreet kept climbing, coaxing the battered aircraft upward. The Mustang strained. The engine howled. The wings shuddered, but she climbed. By the time he reached 4,000 feet, the Luftwaffe had turned away. The squadron that had chased him across the city dragged him through flak barrages and tried to corner him beneath bridges and towers was gone. He had survived the impossible, but Overstreet wasn't safe yet. His fuel was low. His engine was damaged, and he was still deep in enemy territory with a crippled aircraft. The fight was over. The escape had just begun. The sky over central France had gone strangely still. The smoke trails from the last Messerschmitt faded into the distance, dissolving into thin winter air. And for the first time in nearly 20 minutes, Bill Overstreet flew without a German fighter on his tail, but the silence brought no comfort. His Mustang, bloody butch, limped through the air like a wounded animal. Every vibration in the fuselage sent a new warning through the cockpit. The control stick had grown stiff, sluggish. A tremor ran through the airframe whenever he banked. His oil pressure gauge flickered dangerously low, and the earlier flak hits had carved a jagged line along the tail section. Peeling away metal like bark torn from a tree, Overstreet glanced at the fuel gauge low. Very low. He had burned, nearly everything escaping the German kill zone near Clermont-Ferrand. And he was still deep inside enemy territory. There were no friendly airfields, no Allied listening posts, no comforting voices on the radio guiding him home. Just the cold, open winter sky over a hostile land. Bill inhaled slowly, steadying himself. "This plane got me this far," he muttered. "She get me home?" But home was a long way off. He adjusted his heading northwest, toward the faint hope of Allied lines. The Mustang bucked as he trimmed the elevators, losing stability every time he corrected course. At cruising altitude, the engine coughed and spat smoke through the cowling. Every pilot knew that sound. The sound of a Merlin dying got below. French countryside rolled past in alternating waves of forest and farmland. Smoke curled from chimneys. A few roads snaked through the terrain. Bill knew German security forces patrolled these areas aggressively. A forest landing meant capture, or worse. He pushed the throttle forward, just enough to maintain speed without stressing the damaged engine. A balancing act between power and survival. Minutes passed. Then more. Then more. He flew as gently as he could, coaxing every remaining drop of fuel toward the west. The cockpit grew colder. Frost formed around the canopy edges. His hands numbed inside his gloves. Finally, after an eternity, Bill saw it. A break in the terrain. A familiar bend in the river system. And far off, near the horizon, thin lines of craters and mud that marked old front lines. He wasn't home. But he was close. He keyed the radio. "This is Butch. Anyone on frequency?" Static dot, he switched channels. Bloody Butch. Calling. Low fuel, damaged, requesting static again. The earlier flak hits had likely damaged his antenna or scrambler. He was flying blind, alone, and even if Allied forces were beneath him, they had no reason to expect a single Mustang limping in from the wrong direction. But the plane flew on. "Come on, girl. Just a little farther." The engine coughed again, and this time the sputter was deeper. Bill felt the vibration through the pedals. Smoke poured heavier from beneath the cowling. The Mustang began losing altitude, slowly but steadily. He needed to find a place to land. Now doubt below him. A patch of open field spread like a thin green-brown wound in the landscape. It wasn't ideal rough surface, uneven ground, but it was wide enough. He lowered his landing gear. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. The earlier damage had torn out the hydraulic lines. Overstreet exhaled. So this was it. A belly landing behind friendly lines. If he could reach them, he angled toward the open field, reducing throttle, bleeding off airspeed. The engine wheezed one last time, then died. The propeller slowed to windmill speed. The sudden silence hit him harder than the cannon fire. "All right," he whispered. "We glide?" The Mustang descended in a shallow curve. Bill held her level, using every ounce of training to keep the dead aircraft from stalling. The ground rose to meet him. Then, dash impact. A violent shudder tore through the cockpit as the Mustang skidded across frozen earth, smell exploding on either side like white shrapnel. Metal screamed. Panels ripped away. The canopy trembled. Bill braced himself as the aircraft scraped through dirt, bounced once, then slammed down again. Finally, Bloody Butch slid to a stop half buried in churned mud and snow. For a moment, Bill didn't move. He listened to his own heartbeat pounding in the sudden, impossible quiet. Then he unlatched his harness, shoved open the canopy, and crawled out onto the wing. He had survived, and he wasn't alone anymore. 3. American infantrymen approached cautiously from the tree line, rifles raised. You alive in there? One called Dot Bill raised both hands, staggering slightly. I think so. You crash all the way from Germany? Another joked Dot Bill managed a weak smile from a bridge in France. Aftermath, the legend takes flight. When Overstreet's squadron finally heard the story that one of their own had fought an entire Luftwaffe formation alone, flown under a bridge in full combat pursuit, shot down the German squadron leader, escaped flak zones, and glided a dying aircraft back across the lines. They didn't believe it at first. Reports from French resistance fighters confirmed it. Children from Clermont-Ferrand said they saw the Mustang scream beneath the arch like a diving hawk. German pilots later admitted they had chased a lone American, only to lose him in terrain they could not follow. The story spread through the 357th Fighter Group like wildfire. Overstreet was recommended for the Distinguished Flying Cross, though the award wouldn't formally come until after the war. His commander called the maneuver under the bridge one of the most daring acts of flying ever recorded. French citizens later honored him as well. In 2009, decades after the war, the French government awarded Bill Overstreet the Legion d'honneur, the nation's highest distinction, not because he defeated a German ace, not because he fought a squadron alone, but because on that day in 1944, Overstreet gave the people of Clermont-Ferrand something powerful, the sight of an American pilot refusing to break, even under impossible odds. A symbol of resistance, a symbol of courage, a symbol of hope got in the truth, once all the reports were compiled, was undeniable. One pilot defeated an entire Luftwaffe squadron because he refused to surrender the sky. Not to fear, not to numbers, not to death. Just a young man and his Mustang flying into legend.